Hi, my name's Odessa. Confession time. So, the weirdest thing I ever did was pattern my life after an action figure. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's me. I'm kinda crazy. You remember Mr. Muscles? He was a 6-inch muscled wild wrestler toy with a twist waist punch and rubber band legs. My brother had one when we were kids, and sometimes I'd sneak in his room to play with him. I think I wanted Muscles because I was having trouble with this girl at school. Whitney and her gang of bullies would throw rocks at me and call me a freak. Somehow I thought if I looked anything like Mr. Muscles, they'd leave me alone. I asked my mom if I would ever have muscles, and she flipped out and told me that ladies weren't supposed to look like linebackers. But that didn't stop me from playing with Mr. Muscles. One afternoon when I thought my brother was out, I snuck in his room to play with him. I heard my brother coming back, so I hid in his closet with the action figure. That's when he first spoke to me. "Don't worry," Mr. Muscles said. "It'll be our little secret." That night, I hid Mr. Muscles under my pillow. I felt better knowing he was there, that we had a secret. I took Mr. Muscles to school with me the next day, and when Whitney started calling me names, Mr. Muscles told me Whitney was just mad because she had cockleburrs in her underpants. I started laughing, and Whitney and all her cronies had me surrounded. "What's so funny?" "You've got cockleburrs in your underpants," I said. Slowly but surely, everybody started laughing at her. Her anger took over, and she charged at me. But I moved out of the way, and she fell into the mud and turned herself into a laughingstock. School got better, but it wasn't long before Jerry was looking for Mr. Muscles, so I had to sneak him back. Before I tucked him back into Jerry's toy chest, I remember him whispering, "You can be anything you want in this world. Never let anyone tell you that you can't." As I got older, I'd think back on that day and tell myself it was just a wild imagination. I grew up one of the most athletic girls in the neighborhood. When my brother started weightlifting, I did too. Getting strong made me feel more like Mr. Muscles. But when I was in high school, everybody told me weightlifting was for boys, and girls with muscles looked ugly. I guess I started to believe my mom and others, so I stopped working out and started acting like what other people wanted, and I pretended to be happy. All that changed the day my brother left. This was after graduation. I was taking a few classes at a local college. Jerry excused himself from dinner one night and said he was leaving to join the Marines to find some direction. But after he left, my mom took it out on me and started getting on to me about anything she could think of. She said I was the one who needed direction, and then she told me that I dressed like a tomboy. And I got so sick of hearing it that I ran in Jerry's old room and shut the door. The truth was, I didn't like living at home and wanted to be gone too. "Then why don't you just go?" I looked over and I saw Mr. Muscles standing on a shelf. "You heard me," he said, winking at me. I took him from the case and started looking for a job that afternoon. I hit the gym harder than ever before, and Mr. Muscles coached me. "Muscles make you strong. Ice cream makes you weak. If you want it, pump for it." Before I knew it, I was getting huge, and I owed it all to my new life coach. I know what you're probably thinking, but inspiration comes from strange places. Not only did he coach me in the gym, but Mr. Muscles would encourage me to improve my resume and practice my interviewing skills. He even had me working harder at school. Before long, I got called back for this really cool job opportunity selling insurance over the phone, and the job paid well enough for me to get my own place. I was excited, but nervous at the interview. I met the big boss, and I was immediately struck by how gorgeous he was. His name was Aiden, and he hired me. He even complimented me on my muscles and said that fit minds created a great energy in the office. Things were looking up. I spent the weekend working out and even found the perfect apartment. I must have been on fire about my new life, because when I saw a flyer for a female bodybuilding competition, I talked myself into signing up. But my first day of work was a disaster. Aiden introduced me to my supervisor, and when I saw her, I almost spit out my coffee. There, sitting behind a cluttered desk, was none other than Whitney, my old high school bully. She welcomed me, but the way she narrowed her eyes at me, I could tell she knew exactly who I was. We never talked about the incident back on the playground, but over the next few weeks, Whitney made my life a living hell. She gave me the worst leads, all these extra filing assignments, and she even made me work weekends. If that wasn't bad enough, I started getting these anonymous notes calling me names I'd rather not repeat and telling me how ugly my muscles made me. I figured it was Whitney and noticed she wasn't just mean to me. She was mean to most of her employees. I started to take her insults to heart. Normally, I'd work out to de-stress, but now I was afraid of my own muscle growth. I didn't want people to think I was ugly or some kind of freak. I even considered dropping out of the bodybuilder competition. I told myself to ignore her bullying, but she wouldn't stop. She called me muscle freak and made sure to tell me what a terrible job I was doing. She reminded me and everybody that she was dating the big boss, and all she had to do was say one word and she could have anybody fired by lunch. It got so bad, I was going to quit. But I'd already moved out and I didn't want to go crawling back home. Maybe she was right. Maybe muscles were ugly, and maybe lifting weights was for boys. At home in my new apartment, when I was sobbing to myself about it, an old, familiar voice stopped me. "Why don't you just kick her in the crotch? That'll shut her up." It was Mr. Muscles, and my cries turned to laughter. I remembered the advice he used to give me and how he told me to never let somebody else steal my thunder. It was the silliest thing, but I put Mr. Muscles in my purse and took him with me to work. I didn't even have to take him out. If Whitney came by with something negative, I'd picture Mr. Muscles flipping her the bird or saying something sarcastic. And soon I heard Mr. Muscles' words coming out of my mouth. I told her that maybe if she did her job, I wouldn't have to work twice as hard. The look on her face was priceless. She announced that I didn't have to do any more filing, and she said everyone else would do it for me since I was such a crybaby. I tried to explain it wasn't my idea, but it didn't help. Everybody was ticked at me, and Whitney had officially turned the entire office against me and couldn't have been more proud of herself. I reminded myself that I was lucky to have a job, but Mr. Muscles wasn't having any of it. He called her Cockleburr Undies again and said that Whitney would only treat me the way I let her. Even though he was imaginary, Mr. Muscles was right. Whitney was a bully by nature, and if I allowed it to happen to myself or others, I was part of the problem. I marched all the way over to her office, ready to tell her what was what, but she was nowhere to be found. Apparently, she had taken the afternoon off, and my moment of triumph would have to wait. That weekend, Jerry came back in town on sabbatical, and he told me that he found somebody that wanted to buy Mr. Muscles for $20,000. I just stammered, unsure what to say. I have Mr. Muscles, I told him. When he asked why, I tried to avoid the conversation, but I realized that avoiding problems was my problem. So I told Jerry everything. About how I took the action figure when I was a kid, and how he made me feel secure and knew just what to say, and how I still needed him. But you can't forget where the magic comes from, Jerry said. The magic comes from inside you. Without the magic, he's just plastic. He reminded me that my own strength and power came from within. For some reason, everything started to just click and decisions were easier to make. And I said I had an announcement. I'm going to be a female bodybuilder, I said. And as soon as my mom started to say something about a lady's physique, I shut her down. It's my body to govern. She didn't like it, but she did accept it. I found my voice and used it to say goodbye to Mr. Muscles. At work, Whitney was back to her bullying. For no reason, she pulled hundreds of files out and told us all that we needed to have them refiled before anybody takes a break. And then she started insulting us all and calling us lazy. I took a moment and listened carefully for the voice inside. We don't mind working hard, but we're not here to work hard, so you can be lazy. Whitney was ticked I spoke up. What did you say, meathead? If you call me a meathead again, I told her, I'll show you what this meathead can do. I picked her up by the collar. I was doing everything I could to restrain myself. Everybody here deserves respect, and until you learn to give respect, you're never gonna get it back. I roared at her. As soon as I put her down, she hissed at me. You're fired, wench. And then I noticed Aiden. He was standing right behind us, and everybody was watching like we were the movie of the week. You can't fire me, because I quit, I said. But before I could walk out the door, Aiden stopped me. Not so fast, he said. Surprisingly, he was impressed with how I handled myself. If you'll stay, I've got a promotion for you. I accepted, and he gave me Whitney's position and then demoted her to filing secretary. And if that wasn't enough, Aiden asked me out. Turns out that Whitney wasn't his girlfriend. It was all another big lie. Thanks to the voice inside, I ended up with my bully's job and her boyfriend. And more importantly, I stick up for others now. I learned a super important lesson that I'll never forget. People only treat you the way you let them. So don't let the noise of others drown the voice inside. And if you follow your heart, you'll end up in a great place. Now, I'm a bodybuilder by night and an everyday hero under the sun. Is there a hero inside of you? Tell us about it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden wisdom stories. Remember, when you share our stories, you're sharing wisdom.